My parents kicked me out at 18. 7 years later, they showed up at my mansion, the boy who never belonged. Some people remember their 18th birthday as the day they became adults. I remember mine as the day I became homeless. The morning had started like any other. I woke up before sunrise, got dressed, and quietly walked into the kitchen. The smell of pancakes filled the house. My mother was cooking breakfast. For a moment, I smiled. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe they had finally remembered it was my birthday. "Good morning, Mom," I said. She didn't even look at me. "There are eggs in the fridge if you're hungry." I nodded without saying another word. Then my older brother, Daniel, walked downstairs. The moment he entered the kitchen, everything changed. "Oh, Danny, you're awake," my mother said with a bright smile. "Sit down, I made your favorite pancakes." She placed a full plate in front of him. Extra syrup. Extra bacon. Fresh orange juice. I quietly fried 2 eggs for myself. It had always been like this. Daniel was the golden child. I was simply there. No matter what happened, Daniel was never wrong. If he broke something, I got blamed. If he failed a class, my parents said his teachers were unfair. If I got straight A's, they would simply say, "That's what you're supposed to do." After breakfast, my father walked into the kitchen. "Happy birthday, Daniel," he said. Daniel laughed. "Dad, my birthday was 3 months ago." My father froze for a second. Then he looked at me. "Oh, that was it. No apology. No, happy birthday. Nothing." At that moment, I realized something painful. They hadn't forgotten the date. They had forgotten me. That evening, I came home after finishing my shift at the grocery store. The house felt strangely quiet. My father was sitting in the living room. My mother stood beside him. Daniel leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. "Sit down," my father said. My stomach tightened. Something was wrong. "We've made a decision," he continued. "You're 18 now. It's time for you to leave." I stared at him. "What? You heard me. I don't understand. You've lived here long enough." I looked at my mother. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. "Dad, where am I supposed to go?" "That's not our problem." I laughed nervously. I honestly thought it was some kind of cruel joke. Until my father stood up. He handed me a black trash bag. Inside were my clothes. Everything I owned fit into one plastic bag. Daniel smirked. "It's about time." I felt my chest tighten. "I've done everything you've ever asked," I whispered. "I studied hard. I worked after school. I never got into trouble. What did I do wrong?" My father looked me straight in the eyes. "You were never ambitious enough." Those words shattered something inside me. Without another sentence, he opened the front door. The cold evening wind rushed inside. "Leave." I stood there for what felt like forever. Waiting for someone to stop this. Waiting for my mother to hug me. Waiting for someone to say it was all a misunderstanding. No one moved. So I picked up the trash bag, walked outside, and the door slammed shut behind me. I was officially homeless. That first night, I slept inside my old car in the parking lot of a supermarket. It was freezing. The seats were uncomfortable. I barely slept. Around 3 in the morning, I looked through the windshield and whispered to myself, "I'm going to survive. I don't know how, but I will." The next morning, I went to the public gym. I paid for the cheapest membership they had. Not because I wanted to work out, because it gave me access to a shower. Every morning became the same. Wake up in the car, take a shower, put on a clean shirt, go to work, pretend everything was normal. No one at work knew I was homeless. I smiled. I joked with customers. I carried heavy boxes. Then, every night, I returned to the same parking lot. Sometimes I cried before falling asleep. Sometimes I was too exhausted to cry at all. One afternoon, my manager, Mr. Harris, noticed something. "You've been working every extra shift." I smiled. "I need the money." He nodded. "I respect hard workers." Then he handed me an envelope. Inside was a small bonus. It wasn't much, but to me, it felt like winning the lottery. That night, instead of buying fast food, I opened a savings account. I made myself promise. Every dollar I saved would become a brick in the life I wanted to build. Not tomorrow, not next year, one day. Weeks turned into months. I rented a tiny room from an elderly woman named Mrs. Carter. The room was barely big enough for a bed and a desk. The wallpaper was peeling. The heater barely worked. But every night, when I locked the door behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. Mrs. Carter treated me more like family than my own parents ever had. She always left extra soup on the kitchen table. "If you're hungry, don't be shy," she'd say. Those simple words meant more than she could ever imagine. One rainy evening, while cleaning shelves at work, I looked around at everyone rushing through life. Some people complained because they had to wait 5 extra minutes in line. Others complained because their coffee wasn't hot enough. I smiled to myself. A year ago, I had complained about little things too. Now I was grateful for every meal, every paycheck, every sunrise. Pain had changed me, not into someone bitter, but into someone determined. And deep inside, a dream was beginning to grow. I wasn't going to spend my whole life working for someone else. One day, I would build something of my own. Something so successful that no one would ever be able to throw me away again. I just didn't know yet. That dream was about to change my life forever. From rock bottom to $1 million dream. For the first time in my life, I had something my parents could never take away from me. Hope. Every morning, my alarm rang at 5 a.m. I worked at the grocery store until the afternoon, then rushed across town to wash dishes at a small family restaurant. By the time I got home, it was almost midnight. Most people would have gone straight to bed. I opened my laptop. It wasn't new. The screen had a crack running through one corner, and sometimes it shut down without warning. I had bought it secondhand with almost all the money I had saved. To everyone else, it looked like an old, broken computer. To me, it looked like a doorway to a better life. Night after night, I watched free online lessons about programming, business, and marketing. There were times when I didn't understand a single thing. I wanted to quit more than once, but then I would remember the sound of my parents' front door slamming shut. That memory became my fuel. Months passed. Then one evening, while working at the restaurant, I noticed something strange. The chef threw away trays of perfectly good food. "Why are we wasting so much?" I asked. The owner sighed. "We never know how many customers will come. Some days we cook too much. Some days we don't cook enough. We lose thousands every month. That sentence stayed in my mind long after I got home. What if there was a way to predict how much food a restaurant actually needed? I grabbed my notebook and started writing ideas. For the next year, every spare minute went into building a simple software program. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes it crashed. Sometimes it gave completely wrong predictions. But every mistake taught me something new. Finally, I gathered enough courage to show it to the restaurant owner. He stared at the screen for several minutes. Then he looked at me. Does this really work? It will, I replied. I just need someone willing to give it a chance. After a long silence, he smiled. Let's try it. It became my very first customer. I still remember the excitement when he paid me my first monthly subscription. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was the first dollar I had ever earned from something I created myself. That night, I celebrated with a $5 pizza. It tasted better than any expensive meal ever could. Over the next year, more restaurants joined. Word spread. Soon I had 10 clients, then 20, then 50. For the first time, I was making more money from my software than from my 2 jobs. With shaking hands, I walked into the grocery store manager's office. I need to resign, Mr. Harris smiled proudly. I was wondering when this day would come. He stood up and hugged me. You were always meant for bigger things. Those words stayed with me for a long time. As the business grew, I realized I couldn't do everything alone. That's when I met Ryan. Ryan was smart, confident, and charming. He offered to help me grow the company. We'll be partners, he said. I'll handle investors. You focus on building the product. It sounded perfect. For almost a year, we worked side by side. The company grew faster than I had ever imagined. We hired employees, moved into our first office, signed contracts with large restaurant chains. Everything seemed too good to be true, because it was. One Friday morning, I walked into the office and found everyone staring at me. The company's bank account was empty. Ryan was gone. So was nearly every dollar we had. He had secretly transferred the money and disappeared. My hands started shaking. Months of hard work gone. Employees were crying. Bills were waiting. The company was only days away from shutting down. That night, I sat alone in the office, for the first time in years. I felt like giving up. Maybe my parents had been right. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Then I looked at an old photo taped inside my notebook. It wasn't a picture of my family.lt, it was a picture of the tiny room I had rented from Mrs. Carter. A reminder of where I had started. I had survived homelessness. I had survived loneliness. I had survived rejection. I wasn't about to let one dishonest partner destroy everything. The next morning, I called every client personally. I won't lie to you, I said. We've been betrayed, but if you stay with us, I promise I'll make things right. Some clients left, but many stayed. They believed in me. Not because I was rich, because I was honest. For months, I worked harder than ever before. I slept on the office couch. I answered customer emails myself. I fixed software bugs all night. Slowly, the company recovered. Then, one afternoon, something unbelievable happened. A famous national restaurant chain requested a meeting. They had heard about my software. The meeting lasted nearly 4 hours. When it ended, the CEO stood up, smiled, and held out his hand. We'd like to sign a nationwide contract. The deal was worth millions. I walked out of the building in complete silence. Then I sat in my car and cried. Not because I was sad. Because after years of struggle, someone had finally believed in me. That single contract changed everything. Investors came calling. The company expanded across the country. Within 2 years, I was no longer struggling to pay rent. I was one of the youngest tech entrepreneurs in the industry. Magazines wanted interviews. Television shows invited me to speak. People called me an overnight success. They had no idea about the nights I spent sleeping in a freezing car, or the years of rejection that came before success. One sunny afternoon, I stood on top of a hill, looking at a beautiful mansion that overlooked the entire city. The real estate agent smiled. Would you like to see the inside? I nodded. As I walked through the grand entrance, I remembered the day my parents had handed me a black trash bag and told me to leave. Back then, I had owned almost nothing. Now I was standing inside a home I had earned with my own hard work. I wasn't buying it to impress anyone. I was buying it because it represented something priceless. Freedom, a fresh start. A life no one could take away from me. I signed the papers that same afternoon. Little did I know. Only a few weeks after moving into my dream home, someone from my past would knock on my front door. And that single knock would change everything. 7 years. That was how long it had been since I walked out of my parents' house with nothing but a black trash bag full of clothes. Now, I woke up every morning in a mansion I had earned through years of sacrifice. Life was finally peaceful. Until one rainy Saturday afternoon. I was sitting in my home office, reviewing a contract, when my phone buzzed. Motion detected at front gate. I opened the security camera app. 3 people stood outside the gate. My heart nearly stopped. It was my father, my mother, and my older brother, Daniel. For a moment, I couldn't move. The people who had thrown me away were standing outside the home they never believed I could own. I took a deep breath and pressed the button. The gate slowly opened. When they reached the front door, no one spoke. My mother looked older. Her hair had turned gray. My father's shoulders, once strong and proud, now looked tired. Even Daniel looked different. The expensive clothes and confident smile were gone. I finally broke the silence. Come in. They walked inside and looked around in complete disbelief. The marble floors, the grand staircase, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Daniel whispered under his breath, "This place is unbelievable." I ignored him. I led them into the living room. After several uncomfortable minutes, my father finally spoke. "We need your help." Not, "We're sorry." Not, "We've missed you." Just 4 words. "We need your help." I gave a small, bitter smile. "Of course you do." My father looked down at the floor. "My business failed. We lost everything. The bank took the house." My mother quietly wiped away tears. "We've been living in a small apartment." I stayed silent. Then Daniel spoke. "Dad invested in a company. It collapsed. We lost our savings. There are debts we can't pay." Finally, he looked directly at me. "We were hoping you could help." There it was. The real reason they had come. Money. I stood up and walked toward the large windows. The rain poured outside. Without turning around, I asked, do any of you remember what happened 7 years ago? No one answered. I do. I remember standing outside your front door. I remember begging Dad to let me stay one more night. I remember Mom looking away. I remember Daniel laughing. The room became painfully quiet. My mother began crying. I've regretted that day every single day. I slowly turned around. Regret doesn't erase what happened. She nodded. I know. Then something unexpected happened. My father stood up. He walked toward me, and for the first time in my life, he apologized. I failed you. I spent years believing success only belonged to one child. I spoiled Daniel. I ignored you. I thought throwing you out would make you stronger. Instead, it almost destroyed you. Tears filled his eyes. It was the first time I had ever seen my father cry. Before I could answer, Daniel interrupted. So, are you going to help us or not? I looked at him. What exactly are you asking for? He didn't hesitate. $3 million. The room fell silent. Even my parents looked shocked. My mother whispered, Daniel. But he continued, $3 million isn't much for someone like you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After 7 years, he still hadn't changed. I calmly walked to my desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out something I had kept all these years. A faded black trash bag. The same one my father had handed me the day he kicked me out. I placed it on the table. Everyone stared at it. You remember this? No one spoke. This bag held everything I owned. My clothes, my dreams, my future. You believed it wasn't worth anything. But everything I built started with this bag. My father covered his face. My mother cried even harder. Daniel looked away. I looked directly at my brother. When I had nothing, did you help me? No. When I slept in my car, did you call? No. When I skipped meals, did you care? No. So why should I give you $3 million? Daniel had no answer. Security quietly entered the room after hearing raised voices. Daniel became angry. You owe us. I looked him in the eyes. I don't owe you anything. The guards escorted him outside. As he reached the front door, he shouted, you'll regret this. I simply replied, no. I've already lived through my biggest regret. The door closed behind him. I never saw Daniel again. Only my parents remained. Neither of them asked for money anymore. My mother quietly whispered, we didn't come here just for help. We came because we knew we might never get another chance to tell you. We're sorry. For the first time, I believed her. Not because of the tears, because there were no excuses, only responsibility. A week later, I visited them. Their apartment was small, simple, clean. They had sold almost everything they owned. I sat at their tiny kitchen table. My father looked embarrassed. I never expected you to come. I smiled. I almost didn't. I didn't give them millions. Instead, I paid off their debts directly. I made sure they had health insurance. I bought them a modest apartment where they could live comfortably. Not a mansion, not luxury, just a safe place to start over. I also made one condition. If Daniel ever asks you for money again, don't give him a single dollar. They both agreed. Months passed. My father found a job at a local hardware store. It wasn't glamorous, but he worked honestly. My mother volunteered at a community food bank, helping families who were struggling, for the first time in years. They earned their own peace. One evening, they invited me to dinner. The apartment smelled of homemade soup. The table was small. The food was simple, but somehow, it felt warmer than the house I had grown up in. Halfway through the meal, my father looked at me. I used to think success meant money. He smiled sadly. I was wrong. Success is raising your children with love. I learned that too late. I reached across the table. For the first time in my life, I shook my father's hand. Then I hugged my mother. None of us spoke. We didn't need to. As I drove back to my mansion that night, I thought about everything that had happened. People often say the best revenge is becoming successful. They're wrong. Success doesn't heal old wounds. Forgiveness does. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the past never happened. It means refusing to let the past control your future. 7 years earlier, my parents had closed a door on me. 7 years later, I chose to open one for them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved to live without hate. And that was the greatest victory of all. The end.